Mido is an architect and scholar. His main focus is the overlap of information, technologies, and architectural articulations. And by exploring, designing, coding, and writing about architecture while playing with what he calls a lot, and all the buildings of books, movies, and images, clouds, avatars, streams, lists, indexes, and pixels, he asked this question: what is this abundance of information about? How to handle it? And how does it shape the way we think about the world? To navigate and serve these vast flows, Miro codes and articulates synthetic alphabets. Miro is currently a lecturer and postdoctoral researcher at the CAD in ETH Zurich, and from 2004 to 2017, he was a part of the project Roman Lahovic. Yes? And from 2013 to 2015, he has been a part of Future Cities Laboratory, the interdisciplinary research program in Singapore at the ETH Center at the Global Environmental Sustainability, where he co-edited a Quantum City book. Yes? Okay. Well, please welcome Mido.
Thank you very much. So I'm happy to be here. So I'm an architect and a researcher working with Ludger and with Vera for already like 7-8 years. And today I would like to introduce you to Ellis. So Ellis is one of my avatars. She comes from the plenty, she comes from the wonderland, she's an avatar, a bot, an alien. She's partially human, partially artificial, intelligent in many different ways. So she's me, she's not me. We are related, but she's independent and dependent on me. She deals with a lot, with different data streams, abundant with objects, images, and texts. And this is a story about Ellis and how, by playing with different data streams and with my own personal libraries, I was actually able to find consistency in those data streams and bring them together in characters like Ellis. And today I would like to try to give Ellis a voice on Twitter. So this is Ellis, and Twitter is one of her renderings, but I will leave this for the end. And I think Ellis behaves in a similar way like brands behave today. So she's implicit and atmospheric. And of course, she's not perfect. There are a lot of open questions around her, but I think she's a kind of a nice way to tell a story about how to play with a lot of data. So on Twitter, she relates images and texts, but she as well helps me to write. And this is a poem that Ellis and I wrote together. So I call it a generic poem Q29, and its title is Forms of Radiation, and I would like to read it for you fast. So the wine says 1,000 things, moving from sense to information, spiritual. The city atmosphere is suffused with a variety of sounds, colors, information, and odors. Information is becoming our primary and universal addiction. I have, say you, a certain information of a deity imprinted in my mind. You gave me plenty of background information. What I want is information, not useful information, of course, but useless information. Beyond the end, beyond all finality, we enter a paradoxical state, the state of too much reality, too much positivity, too much information. The entropy increase is always larger than the information obtained. Newspapers, news proceed by redundancy in that they tell us we must think, retain, expect, etc. Language is neither informational nor communicational. A century of more and more rapid movement of information by print had developed new sensibilities. And they can manipulate several forms of information at the same time, yet they neither understand it nor integrate it nor synthesize it as do we, their ancestors. They seem to me to embody the same information just coded in two complementary ways. Information resides in informed mass, not in materiality that would be the opposite of immaterial forms. Information can be changed into negentropy and vice versa. The connection between entropy and information is absolutely essential for consistency. This means that the knowledge is not stored, that the knowledge is stored not explicitly but implicitly in a spread about manner rather than as a local pockets of information. And whether this information is valuable or worthless does not concern us. The essential point is that all information is paid for in negentropy. From this negative entropy, the demon obtains information. Knowledge is not gratuitous, information has a price. An infinite amount of information is unattainable. We may have fluctuations in the information obtained in individuals' operations. Only if system elements have a chance here or there to be open or closed does the system produce information. Information is more a matter of process than of storage. We miss the very character of information when we try to relate it to the passive representation of sense. But we are in no position to investigate the process of thought, and we cannot for the moment introduce into our theory any element involving the human value of information. Information is information, not matter or energy. And I admit that in the present state of my information, I do not understand it. The information must be carried by some physical process, say some form of radiation. So to write these kind of poems, Ellis and I, we communicate. And we communicate via something which I call atom letters. And these atom letters, they are independent of media. They are, in a way, characters of a synthetic alphabet and characters of a dramatic play at the same time. And then, exactly in this sense, I think that Ellis is a character. And this here, these are characters. This is a kind of, these are characters or the atom letters of an alphabet of images that are etched into a metal sheet. And they celebrate information almost like a graphical poem in a very similar way as the first poem did. And Ellis, as we see, kind of plays with information independent of media. So she plays with pixels and images, she plays with voxels and chairs and letters and text. And since she's my avatar, she's in a way interested as me in architecture and information. So she talks about them by potentially playing with all the images and by potentially working with all the texts. And here comes one of the kind of paradoxes of working with big data with a lot of information. So if the data is big enough and we can kind of squeeze it, we can play with it, look at it from this side or from that side, in principle it will not tell us the truth about the world, but it will show us the world we want to see. In principle, it's kind of we will design the world or we will project the world we want to see with it. So if this is so, how do we then talk about the things that we care for? So how do I write? If I have all the books at my disposal, how do I work with pictures if pictures are all around the place? And one way of trying to think of this is, as we've heard before, to try to think of coding as a kind of a literacy. And then this is a story, in principle, of how Ellis became literate in coding. And the ambient in which Ellis grew up, or the ambient in which she started to code, was filled with aliens, mutants, migrants, cyborgs, and avatars. And they are neither mortal nor immortal, neither of heaven nor of earth. They inhabit a kind of a space of information and abundance. And what I want to think about is what kind of creatures is she hanging out with, what kind of objects do they use, how do they mingle and merge with each other, what is their nature different than ours? And there are more and more of these guys. And the more we focus, the harder we see, because they are always kind of never pure combination of different creatures, of different worlds, of reality and fiction, of different media, and this is what makes them interesting and beautiful, but on the other hand, impossible to understand. There are no clear categories, no labels, no boxes, just kind of clouds and crystals. And one could say that they live on the Google planet, that they hang out among other avatars and aliens, and that social media is their means of transport, the manner in which they render their faces, and branding is their way of expression. Bitcoin is their currency. They like internet very much, they like the web, they like information. So maybe they are information. Virtual or actual, however we look at them, they influence our world. So they give us many faces. So they are us. We can have many different avatars, many virtual identities, and we can play with them. So this is Ellis, and she's one of my virtual identities. And this here is her chair. And again, this chair, we kind of designed it together. So we can think as well of this chair as a kind of an avatar of Ellis. This chair changes in a way as the mood of Ellis changes or as my mood is changing. And in itself, it contains a lot of other chairs, a lot of other objects or virtual identities, just as Ellis does. So all of this is a kind of a manner in which Ellis plays with any kind of abstract objects. Not any kind, but with certain kinds of abstract objects. But her biggest passion is architecture. Whenever she can, she collects images from architectural blogs. So it's a kind of addiction. She's addicted to collecting images, and she's very, very good at this. So at the moment, she's focused on 2 architectural blogs, the Zine and Arc Daily, and they're in principle the kind of the most prominent blogs in architecture. And as an avatar in the flow, she behaves like a search engine. So she's scanning, indexing, filtering, and taking snapshots. And she collected all the images these blogs ever published in one evening. And to do so, she writes, we can call them small poems. Yeah? So this small poem on 20 lines is able to take everything this blog ever published in one evening. So in principle, how it works, we run it, we get all the links from Arc Daily of today, and then we can say, okay, I want to have the images of the first post. Here they are, and if you just want to check what's going on there, yeah. So these are the images from the blog. If we want to have the images from the second article, then we just write 2, and they're coming. So now we can imagine Arc Daily has around 3,000 pages, so if I say the start page is 1 and the stop page is 3,000, I get all. Then the funny thing is, I write another poem, I get 10 years of publishing from the Zine. And suddenly I'm playing with more than 500,000 or more than 1 million or more than 5 million, doesn't matter, images which are on my computer. So I have all of them. And then the tricky part happens. So we are Ellis is kind of lost on the generic plane of images. So here we have all the famous architects, all the kind of buildings, different furnitures, different schools of thinking, different thoughts, different traditions, even some cities kind of smart, stupid, sustainable, and so on. So it's a kind of a setting in which there are just too many images to go through them and look at them and trying to kind of, okay, this is this, this is that. So how do we think about this? How do we think about information? How do we develop a kind of an attitude to work with those images? And Alice has a way how to work with these images without looking at them. Huh? So she, in principle, encodes them. She gives an informational face to a blog and to all of its images. And she does it in principle like this. This is an informational face of a blog of Arc Daily. So you just imagine that there is like 5 million of images. This is an encoding of an image in terms of color and its structure. And then this is a kind of an index towards either a pixel or a segment of an image or whatever. So you can encode an image in many different ways. So it's an open game how you want to encode. So I like to rather call it encoding than measuring. In a way, it's a question of design, to give a vector, to give a kind of a direction to a blog or to a cloud. So once she's able to encode the images by color and their structure, Ellis uses machine learning or machine intelligence to group images which are similar to each other. And when she groups these images, she produces a kind of a weather of architecture in terms of ArcDaily and the Zine, of course. And in it, again, in this weather, we have many different kind of atmospheres, many different kind of textures. Just this time, we can kind of navigate through them. The interesting thing here is that any two images that we take, we can make a kind of a connection between them, and this connection we will always be able to tell a story how we came from this point to this. But the interesting thing is that we can do it like this as well, or like this, or like this, and come to this point. So we can, in principle, tell any story that we want to say. And are these stories kind of fake, or are they real? I don't know, but I think it's not maybe the right way to ask if this is kind of fake or not fake. And then out of this atmosphere, Ellis picks up flavors that she likes. So she just kind of says, okay, I will pick up, for instance, from here, this cell, this atom letter, this alphabet, this character, and this one, and so on, and I will unfold them, look what is inside of them. So it's almost like a kind of a search for flavors, search for consistencies, out of which Ellis will be able to produce her own face, let's say, or her own brain. So what we see here is a kind of a set of flashes which are consistent in themselves, even though we never had to specify what is, for instance, a texture, what is an object, what is a drawing, what is a house, and so on. And these things are able to group together just by looking at the pixels, colors, structure, or whatever we are interested in. And then Ellis selects a certain amount of flavor she wants to have. And we get a face, not a face, I would rather call it now a brain of Ellis. And this is a brain of Ellis in terms of images from ArcDaily and the Zine. She can look at other images as well via this brain. And the funny thing is that this brain can change very easily. Huh? So if we pick another set of flavors, we get another sensibility, another vector, another way to talk to images. The beautiful thing about information is that we can deal with not exactly, but in a very similar manner with text as we deal with images. So as Ellis is collecting images, she collects texts about architecture as well. And again, she's super good in this. And now, the beautiful thing is that the story is in principle exactly the same. Huh? So then the conceptualization is a little bit different. Instead of the weather in architecture, we get a galaxy of concepts. But Ellis is doing the same thing as an avatar in the flow. She behaves like a search engine. She's scanning, filtering, indexing, and taking snapshots of phenomena she likes interesting. Now she writes a poem, but like a super short poem. It's one line, and we run it, and the books are coming. I find this great. And then if we look, these are the books. I know that the book 11 is Ellis. And then here the books are in EPUB, so they are directly in a nice format that I can work with Mathematica immediately. And if we change these numbers here, instead of 5 and 20, I put 1 and 60,000, I download all the books from the Gutenberg Galaxy. And then again, exactly the same process happens. What we get, in principle, I downloaded with poems like this, not only from Gutenberg Galaxies, but from different libraries, more than 12,000 books. Then I said, okay, 12,000 is enough to play with. Otherwise, for the small PC, it gets a little bit tricky. But we get this kind of thing. So again, like with the images, I've never seen them. I don't know what they're about. It's completely unknown. It's the financialization of housing, voodoo histories, mothers coming to terms with the suicide of her gay son, Welsh Gothic, history of the Byzantine, long dark tea time, Albert Camus, philosophy and Sufism, and then Zizek, less than nothing. So it's a kind of completely random thing, but again, Ellis has a way how to look at these books. She has a kind of a technique, and she does it by having her own personal library. So this library, I call it a Xenotheka. So it's a personal library, it's a kind of a context, it's a neighborhood, a place in which I feel comfortable, where in principle I haven't read all of these books, but I have a feeling about what they are about. So they help me navigate the space of, I call it, of the infinite flow of books. So I would say that Xenotheka is a way of looking. It's a way of looking which is indexed by books. And in this Xenotheka, Ellis behaves again in a similar way. So she takes the whole library, she counts all the words, and then finds a kind of a similarity between these words by playing with machine learning. So as an example, for instance, she takes Vitruvius, she takes the first paragraph of Vitruvius, and then out of this, so she takes in principle the whole book and then all the books, but in the first paragraph she translates it into a connectivity of its own elements. So she connects preface to long, long to divinely, and so on. And out of this she gets these little creatures, and these little creatures are graphs of books, and books are represented as a connectivity of their own elements, as a connectivity of words. And then she just relates the graphs. By relating the graph, she gets exactly the same thing, like with the images. So horizontally, it's a kind of an index of a specific word in all the books, and vertically, it's one book with all of its words. And this is a dictionary of all the books and the library. So it's a kind of both at the same time. And if we encode and if we play and look at the books from this kind of perspective, then if we have one library, we encode it by counting words. Another library, we encode, let's say, by counting letters or by Google ratings or whatever. If we have the same book in both of these libraries, this one book will behave in different ways. So again, I think Ellis is not analyzing these books and libraries. I think she's rather encoding them. And the nice thing here is that in principle there are no exceptions. All the words can be integrated. And now Ellis creates a stage from which she looks at the library, at the unknown, at the infinite flow of books. And of course, her stage again is a library. This time it's her own library, which she divided into 12 shelves, or we can say into 12 characters, or we can say into 12 atom letters. And here, books grouped in a way that books which are similar to each other, or the ones that like each other, come to the same shelf. So here on the left, for instance, we can see that we have Swift, and we have Don Quixote, and then Asimov, Beckett, and so on. So it's a little bit more literally. And then on the other part of the spectrum, we have Kasch, we have Einstein, Barth, Deleuze, and then we have Schumacher, Eisenman, and so on. So it's a kind of more, let's say, theory, architecture-oriented shelves. Then again, Ellis divides this library into 3 characters. And the one that she is interested in, the one in which she wants to transform herself, is this one. Huh? Now she just goes back to the flow, and from the flow she picks up books, and she's throwing them towards this matrix. And then the books, which when they're entering this matrix, they're looking for an environment in which they feel comfortable. And so the character 3, which is Ellis, accepts 81 books. So there are 81 guests which are welcomed to this character. And we don't have a clue what are the titles, what are the authors, or what these books are about. But we know that they should be, if we have this kind of a spectrum, they should be most similar to this. So of course, if there is a kind of, for instance, a biology book here, then it would be a kind of random where it will land, because the vocabulary of that book is somehow not present in the vocabulary which Ellis has with these books. Then we get the body of Ellis, and the body of Ellis, as I said, is constituted by a body of books, which I don't have a clue what they are about, but then I start counting words again. So if we look at the titles of all the books, and just the most frequent word in the title is digital. And then out of all these books, we again, with the play of machine learning, we create, let's say, the 4 most probable tempers of Ellis, and then we can say, if these are these sub-bodies or tempers, let's say, different tempers of Ellis, then in one temper she's interested in design, in another one in film, fashion, cinema, and image. She also likes the digital, technology, space, image, news, a little bit of contemplation and yoga. So it's a kind of a trendy character. These are her favorite words. So we are able to discuss and characterize Ellis with the body of books that we didn't know what they're about. So this is her body. Now, if we zoom a little bit, we can look at her brain. So her brain, this is her brain. We had the image brain of Ellis, and now this is the text brain of Ellis. And the text brain consists out of these books, and each cell here represents, or shows one book. It's a face of a book. And these faces of books want to distinguish themselves by showing their most prominent concepts. And these are the yellow and the red spots. If we zoom a little bit more, again, just to kind of get a feeling of what's going on. So instead of having the weather in architecture, what we have is a galaxy of concepts. And onto this galaxy of concepts, each book projects itself. So it shines a light on the galaxy in a specific way. So for instance, Smith and Marx, they shine in a very similar way towards this galaxy, in a way that their highlights or the topics of interest are at the same place. So it's a kind of relationship in which we could say that they like each other or love each other. In another setting, where, for instance, Schumacher ran away to one part of the galaxy, and then Leibniz went to the other part of the galaxy. Of course, now it's easy, you can guess. It's a kind of a not so comfortable relationship. This is very arbitrary how I characterize this and how I play with this, but we could say that there is a kind of consistency in these things. Or, for instance, in this kind of relationship, where there is a little bit more flickering, we could also say there is a little bit more kind of flirting. One is on the left, the other one is on the right. Once, or not once, so if we remove the color, what is behind is a galaxy of concepts. So it's a context, it's a kind of, again, a neighborhood of all the words from a specific library. And in it, we have, again, the atom letters, like with the images. So each atom letter in itself contains a lot of different elements. Either before we had images, now we have words. And we can zoom even more. We can zoom more and look inside of the galaxy of concepts for its elements, for its alphabet. So how we get closer to the way Ellis can think and talk. So for instance, now I'm interested in the index of information. And of course, this is not the definition of information, but it's information in a specific context, encoded in a specific way. And to get a feeling of what it is about, we have to kind of navigate a little bit through the galaxy to get an understanding. So it's about spectrum, Maxwell, fluctuations, Wieners, conduction, cybernetics, entropy, amplifier, harmonic, demon, electrical, tape, operator, proton, electron, and so on. So it's a kind of a notion of information in, let's say, an electric environment. So if we look at the whole galaxy, it's kind of big, and here it's information, and then the interesting thing is the data is not that far away. So it's a kind of a complementary concept, and let's say that's why it's close, or in this context, it's close. Yeah? And then this data gives a completely different feeling. So data is with a laser, with a keyboard, with a scan processor, desktop, computer, airline, software, and so on. So it's a kind of, I would say, a data in a setting of applications. And again, the beautiful thing is that we get this kind of subtle differentiations between those concepts just by playing with words and encoding books in specific ways. So we never know what is information or what is data, but by putting them in different constellations and looking for them and navigating around, we can get different feelings how these concepts change. And once we have Ellis's brain constituted in this way, we can start talking to it. So we can start texting with it. So we can ask it questions. So for instance, now we were looking for the concept of information, but now I want to ask Ellis, okay, I want to talk about architecture. Give me the conception of architecture. Give me some concepts around just to get a feeling what they're about. And I want to have 50 people, or not 50 books, 50 characters, 50 actors to talk about architecture, and I want to know what is architecture for them. And I ask Ellis, and she says, okay, here is the concept of architecture. These are the other atom letters, or this is an index of, this is an atom letter which contains the index of architecture, and these are the guys that talk about it. And then we get them in a scale of probabilities of them talking about this concept. Yeah? So Hayes' theory of architecture has the most to say about it, and it's very focused, unlike, for instance, Schumacher, that's not that focused. And these are the probabilities of them saying something. And then we get all these kind of answers. Yeah? So for instance, with Schumacher, he says, at this stage in the argument, the question of demarcation of autonomy of the discipline of architecture is once more posed. So we can kind of like it or not like it. It doesn't matter, but there is a lot to think about what architecture might be about. Then we can ask all sort of different questions as well. Yeah? So for instance, with Eisenman, yet unlike literature, architecture is taught to presume a single time. The experience of building and the conceptualization of building are understood as one and the same. And you can imagine how this can go for forever. So I like this one. Yeah, with Jenks, architecture is like a person, or maybe a house is like a person. Yeah? Okay, so this is how we can talk to Ellis, talk to her brain. Huh? So, and this is the way how I was in principle writing the poem from the beginning. But let's remember that Ellis has two brains. So she has a brain of images with more than 500,000 images, and she has a brain of books with more than 13,000 books, or not actually. this is a distillation of 500,000 images into a specific brain, and this is a distillation of 13,000 books towards a certain vector or towards a certain direction, towards flows of information. So these are two spectrums of flavors. And these, in principle, these two data sets are independent, and I don't have to know what's in them. So that's the beautiful thing. I don't have to see all these images, and I don't have to read all these books, and yet this character of Ellis is me, and then she is not me. But we are related, and then she is independent and dependent on me at the same time. So by giving a kind of a medium, a space and time to these two independent brains or data sets, and finding a bridge in between them, we can find a way how Ellis can become an actor in the digital. Yeah, so it's different. In the beginning, I'm working with her, and we are kind of writing, and then we are kind of together. Then she can have a different rendering where she's more autonomous, but it's about me at the same time. And now Ellis is on Twitter, and she's tweeting. And what she does, in principle, is this. So it's another poem that we have, again, 20, 30 lines. What's happening with Ellis is that she takes an image from her brain, so the one that she kind of likes, there is a consistency there. Then she tries to guess what is on this image. She puts certain hashtags what might be here, so it's a scuba ventilator device and so on. Then she uses this as a question towards her library of texts, and she selects certain books. Out of these books, she selects a number of sentences, and then randomly she selects 10 of them, and out of these 10, she selects 10 sentences, and out of these 10, she selects one randomly. So then she comments on the image. She says, "They preserve an artifact in situ fixed on slides or glass plates with all its details and variation, allowing the observer to hypothesize, test theories, or even abandon previous theoretical conjectures." And then she just posts this on Twitter. This is Ellis from the beginning on Twitter. She has 1,057 followers. She makes around 25 posts per day. And then it's always the same. Yeah? So she looks at this image. She says, I don't know how to pronounce this. Mammal, teleostan, cloud bed. And then she says, a minute later, he uploads an image of his face concealed by a cloud of grainy blue smoke. And then sometimes these comments are a little bit better, sometimes they're a little bit silly, but there is a kind of consistency in the way how she comments or how she plays with these images. Yeah? So here it's a bicycle rack, elm tree rack, common tree. It is therefore clear that a public square should be surrounded by pockets of activity: shops, stands, benches, displays, rails, courts, gardens, new racks. Yeah? So this time she guessed. So I will not go, or this one is good as well. I check it always before to find the nice ones. Yeah? In contrast with a solid body aircraft, which looks like a bird, he built a bar and a wine structure that does not exist in nature. So there, I mean, it's maybe not that one, but that would be good, but there is a kind of solidity, and there is this thing on top. So what I find interesting is that Ellis is a kind of a character with a specific motivation, but without a given script. So she doesn't have a fixed narrative like actors in a movie, but she's still able to talk. She has two panoramas of her own concepts with certain sensitivities and atmospheres, and their consistencies is in their bodies of information and my encodings. I would say Ellis is a probabilistic character. She's a vector, a kind of a direction in the plenty. And I think she's one of the ways one can behave on internet by taking into account the abundance of information. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Miro, for a beautiful lecture. Questions? Okay, who's up for?
How does Alice feel about the intellectual property of all the things she posts?
Very good. I mean, we can, what I think it's interesting is that we can pretend, for instance, with the images, I'm not sure, but we can pretend that we are not able to do this kind of stuff and then kind of be very careful and so on, but then in principle we are out of the game, in my opinion. Yeah? Or we can just think of internet as a kind of a public space, and in this publicity behave. So at the moment there are no strict codes how to do this, so what's okay, what's not okay. Then I think we can play, and all the big players, they play with all. Yeah? So they take everything from everyone and they just do it. And I think what's interesting with Ellis is that Ellis in principle does the same. Yeah? She just goes, takes everything from a specific place, makes her articulations and then plays. And then maybe later certain codes of behavior in this public space will be developed in different ways, and then it's going to be different. Yeah. But I think at the moment it's okay.
Anyone?
Thank you, Miro. This was fantastic. Michel Serres says in his book Thumbelina that Thumbelina has ancestors. And I understand Suzanne Langer as an ancestor of Thumbelina. How do you look at that? You know, what I did, for example, so that's one question, and I tried to actually experiment a little bit with that thought. So I had, because the Suzanne Langer papers are not, so her card index box, for example, has not been digitized yet, whatever. So I once experimented with a couple of students with the blog of Maria Popova, Brain Pickings. And I postulated that, you know, Popova's Brain Pickings is Thumbelina. And I had students like download everything and work on galaxies and stuff with that material that they found. But my feeling is, of course, that your Alice is yet of a different generation compared to Popova, for example, the blogger, the real-life blogger, Alice with 2 brains and stuff like that. So that would be my second question. Do you also see those 3 generations, Langer, Popova, and Alice?
I don't know Popova.
It's just a blogger. I mean, it's a blogger that I like. She reads a lot of books. She combines them in interesting ways. You know, it could be any other blogger that writes about books.
I think what's so with Langer, I really liked, as I told you, the introduction to her book, and I think it's similar to the ways, so how she talks about what are facts, what does it mean to be empirical, how to measure things, about different paradigms and so on. So I think this kind of thinking is present with Ellis, so with the concepts and so on, because somehow you are measuring and being very precise about all these things, but then yet they are super open. Yeah? So it's in principle by themselves they are nothing. So they need a kind of interpretation. They need a way of connecting there, in a way, a triggering for thinking about things which is open to different ways. So I think in this way this fits with Langer. I think that's a kind of in sync. And in terms of blogging and these things, I think what I really like conceptually is, for instance, that today with the pop stars, rock stars, and all these kind of famous people, they completely get the idea that these avatars, that they can run like several of them. Yeah? So they have 6 different avatars, one for, they do fashion, they do music, they do movies, they do whatever, and they have different people running these things. So to have the multiplicity of faces, I think this is not a new concept. This is kind of has always been around how to behave in different environments and so on. I think here with these kind of things, it's interesting to think what they are about, what social media is about, how to think of machine intelligence, how to think of our own intelligence, how to think about who we are as persons, and so on. So I think these questions are kind of always around. Just with these instrument techniques and so on, we get different perspective how to think about them.
Any more questions? I can also pick up on this question maybe with who is Alice interacting with when she's online? Does she have any friends?
I mean, she has this kind of random 1,000 people that follow her. She, online, in this kind of mode, when she's a little bit more independent, then she's able to, for instance, in the same way like she looks when she's tweeting her stuff, she's searching for the similar concepts on Twitter, then she finds these kind of concepts, she looks for images, and then she looks if she likes the image or not, and then if she likes it, then she posts it. So this is kind of still very rudimentary, but online that's that kind of interaction, so she's able to retweet and make some kind of connection with other avatars or other characters on internet. And then there is, of course, this level of when I want to work with her. Yeah? So when you do kind of writing, and I think this is beautiful, when you do a certain kind of writing that you can play with these libraries, yeah? With this kind of texting cenoteka. And now we have a design studio where we kind of use these techniques to also write stories about architecture, and then Ludger developed, so he integrated these kind of things with working with images and with text and then with geodata and so on into a beautiful instrument that kind of goes, which is in principle more beautiful to use than this one. Yeah? But it kind of, so I think it's interesting that these characters can work on the level with you, then it can be a little bit more independent, a little bit less, and so on.
Thanks. Okay, any more questions or comments in the room? No? Okay. Then we thank you, Miro, again for your presentation, and then we can...
Thank you.